Espina, could you check in the YouTube that well, not yet? It's coming up.
It's okay. It's on.
It's on. Yeah. Oh, I can see us all. That's good. Okay, we're all there. Okay. We already have 2 people watching.
8.
YouTube. And
Nice.
we have 20 participants actually. Alessandra Balatesti, wait. The panelists, okay. Attendees, okay.
Hello, everyone. We're starting in 4 minutes.
Good.
Hello, everyone. I think as more and more attendees are joining us, I think we could just wait for a few more minutes before we start. Good morning and good afternoon, dear friends and colleagues. Welcome to the third of a series of online events organized by ECOWEEK that aims to change people's habits and promote sustainability. Sustainability is a wider topic and should not only be reflected in architecture or our natural environment. As designers, we're often called to contribute in solving social matters. Our proposals can either bring social justice or increase the social inequalities. Some solutions can be beneficial to some people, but at the same time can harm others or just bring a temporary relief in complicated political matters. In the end, we always have to think and to filter our actions. we always have to ask what and who matters in architecture, which voices speak through the built landscape and through its written histories, how and from whom is change generated. This 48-hour virtual event will focus on the intersection between environmental and social struggles to challenge once again and with more strength the way we think, talk, write about, and practice architecture. Discourse on architecture and transitional justice, colonial heritage and decolonization, refugee camps and humanitarian settlements, public space and feminism, environmental and labor struggles will be generated by our experts who come from different professional backgrounds and from Rome, Italy, and other parts of the world. This event is marking the 50-year anniversary of ECOWEEK. Our next challenges will include an online event in May 2021 to join European partners in celebrating Green Week, and an anniversary physical international high-profile event in August 2021 in Athens, Greece, to address the challenge of sustainability, circular economy, and climate change in the theme of history, tourism, and sustainability. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank our amazing speakers and workshop leaders. I want to thank our partners for the successful collaboration, especially La Sapienza Università in Roma, the University of Arkansas Rome program, the Association of American College and University Programs in Italy, the Green Building Council Italia, the Belle Architette, and our media partners who joined in getting the word out. Especially, I would like to thank Maria Luisa Palumbo, who brought the concept of this event in life and curated with a great success. I would also like to thank our colleagues and co-organizers, Consuelo Brigida, Francesco Bedesi, and Sofia Pascia. Their great ideas and contribution organizing the event were valuable. Later on, Maria Luisa, Consuelo, Francesco, Sofia, Elias, and me will introduce and moderate each panel of discussion. And by the end of the day, more instructions will be given to the participants of the workshops by Sofia. I also want to thank our fantastic ECOWEEK team for the amazing collaboration and for the very impressive result that we all managed to put together in a very short period of time. Especially once again, I would like to thank Sofia for her enthusiasm and great collaboration. Sofia joined us a few years ago, and she has recently taken a leading role within the team and also in the organization and coordination of this event. Last but not least, I would like to thank Elias for his mentorship skills, guidance, endless energy, and amazing partnership. And now I'm delighted to give the microphone to Elias Messinas. Elias, besides being the creator of ECOWEEK, he's a practicing architect and urban planner. He is also an expert in public participation processes and a senior lecturer who teaches architecture and design in Israel and Greece. Elias is the editor of the ECOWEEK catalog and book, in addition to books and numerous articles, and the driving force of 15 years of ECOWEEK around the world. Elias, the microphone is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Despina. I'm trying to manage the share screen. Just bear with me, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, can you see my screen? Does it work?
Yes.
Yes, it's good. Good. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Despina. Hi and welcome everybody to the third ECOWEEK Online Challenge. Well, Despina is very modest and did not introduce herself, so I will do that for her. Despina, besides being an ECOWEEK associate and the coordinator of numerous ECOWEEK events around the world, she's also a very talented landscape architect and an amazing organizer and a truly valuable partner. So I want to also give Despina a very special thank you. I'm Elias Messinas, I'm the founder of ECOWEEK, and I would like to say the naive founder of ECOWEEK, and I want to thank you all for joining us today to this very special event and celebration. I joined Despina to thank our partners from Italy, from around the world, who helped create this event, especially Maria Luisa Palumbo, Francesco Bedeschi, Consuelo Lorbrigida, and from our team, our amazing team member, Sofia Pascia, who coordinated the entire event. And also to thank our great ECOWEEK team for amazing work they do and keep on doing until the summer, I hope. Why was ECOWEEK established 15 years ago, and why do we still need to speak about intersectional justice? because today the planet more than ever is still at a crossroads. The COVID is making every problem stand out in extreme proportions. We have climate change that is making itself more obvious and more present than ever. We have injustice and violence in every possible corner of our lives, in the public space, at work, and at home. We have inequality in every possible aspect of our lives, in business, politics, in public space, in our infrastructures, and even in our own families. This event was born from a discussion about environmental injustice, how those who have access to capital and power can, for self-profit, exploit, mine, dig out, take away resources that belong to the commons, that means to all of us. And so the discussion led to a more apparent injustice and inequality within our own society. And this is how the question was raised and the need to create this platform to open it up, to address it, and perhaps find ways to tackle it. To tackle it in a sharing and inclusive way, inclusive like the Pantheon behind you see behind many of our speakers, that we chose the event image. It's not by accident. The Pantheon is an inclusive space for all gods, and in a similar way that we want to create places that are safe, supportive, and welcoming for all people. We have the privilege today to have with us expert professionals and academics who work with communities, design, art, architecture, landscape architecture, urban planning, activism, and in shaping public space. You will hear their lectures and work with them in the workshops. We hope that they will inspire you and get you thinking about new ideas and how you can change the way that you think and practice your profession. Before I give the microphone to Maria Luisa to introduce the event, I would like, for those of you who don't know us, who don't know ECOWEEK, to give you a short introduction about what ECOWEEK is. ECOWEEK is an NGO with a passion to change people's habits and a mission to raise environmental awareness and to promote the principles of sustainability. ECOWEEK was established in Greece in 2005, and from there it reached out to 20 countries in physical and online events. We created a network of young professionals and experts in 56 countries around the world. ECOWEEK programs put the participants at the center through design workshops and hands-on activity in different sites, in public space, and with different materials. And we also hold public participation events and sessions that give voice to the project stakeholders, regardless of age. And we encourage our participants to engage in real projects by using materials and tools to build things at different scales and materials in different sites, in public schools, public parks, city centers, and in community centers. Don't miss reading online our first book with many sustainable design ideas and examples by experts such as Kengo Kuma and BIG and Francis Quere. And stay tuned for our second book, which will be coming out later this year. As Despina pointed out, this year is a celebratory year for our 15 years of activity. And that will bring us together in the summer of 2021 for a big international festival in Egina, Greece, where the place where ECOWEEK actually started 15 years ago. We really look forward to seeing you in Greece, in Egina, and we hope that you will join us for lectures, workshops, installations, placemaking, site visits, exhibitions, films, public discussions, and urban interventions, and much, much more, which we believe will be an unforgettable event. We will be posting more details in our website. You can see it at the bottom. It's ecoweek.org, and also in our social media, so keep following us. Thank you all again for joining us, and enjoy the program. Now, I would like to introduce my dear friend and valued colleague, Maria Luisa Palumbo, very soon Dr. Palumbo, who's an architect, researcher, and educator. Maria Luisa is an architect and senior fellow of the McLuhan Program in Culture and Technology of Toronto University, and a member of the Italian National Institute of Architecture in Rome. Maria Luisa is the author of numerous books and articles, and a regular contributor to Art Tribuna, in Domus and East West, and many more. In 2012, Maria Luisa curated Remade in Italy the final section of the Italian Pavilion at the Venice Biennale of Architecture with Luca Zevi. Maria Luisa is currently a PhD student at the History of Architecture and Urban Development program at Cornell University. So Maria Luisa, thank you for being with us again, to joining us in this event and helping us organize and bringing in the spirit in this event. And the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elias, and thank you to the whole ECOWEEK team. It is a great pleasure to be here, finally, all together online, to discuss about architecture and justice through the lens of intersectionality. And even if for many of us this is a new and such a problematic word, its meaning is simple, and I think it helps to get closer to the question of justice. Intersectionality, in fact, is a frame to help us thinking how social inequalities and justice and injustice are not just all around us, but they are man-made structures. They are, in a way, very specific social architectures, and as such, they have been built in time and space, and as such, they can be unbuilt. Intersectionality, it is a frame to help us thinking that these structures of oppression are manifold, different and specific, and yet not exclusive. They are, on the contrary, deeply interconnected. They intersect one each other. Class, so how much money we have in our bank account, gender, the social construction about sexuality, race, the social construction about the color of our skin, are all factors which have huge impacts on our lives. And they intersect each other, and they intersect in space. Space, as we will discuss through our lectures, is the place where, and often one of the tools through which violent hierarchies have been built. Space is the place where these structures have to be unbuilt. Accordingly, the question for us as architects and designers is how can we use architecture not only to add something new to this world, but with the precise aim to use architecture to unbuild structures of oppression and power, or in a positive sense, let's say, to make space for empowering and reparative practice. With these questions in mind, I want to thank again not only the ECOWEEK team, but also all our wonderful guests who accepted to be speaking today, and they offered their precious time, especially today on Saturday, Saturday night for many of us, Saturday morning for somebody else. So really thank you again. And I want to introduce Sofia Passia, architect and designer now living in Paris. And as you were a member of the ECOWEEK team and the actual coordinator of this event. So Sofia, thank you so much. You have been a great curator and coordinator. And please, I give you the stage to introduce our first guest.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Malu. I would like to thank you personally for curating this great event. And of course, thank you, Elias and Despina, for this opportunity, because I'm in the ECOWEEK team during 2016. And it's always a pleasure to be moderating lectures with amazing speakers. To our audience, please feel free to type any questions in the Q&A section and on the YouTube chat. And we'll make sure to address most of them given the time allow us. So to begin with, our first speaker is the founder of REWAC Center of Architectural Conservation in Palestine, a rich country, quoting her, with richness that emanates from the country's history and heritage. Her latest book, An English Suit and a Jewish Cow, is now published in Italy. She has taught architecture at Columbia University, Birchside University, and the University of Jordan, and she's more known for her novel, Sharon and My Mother-in-Law, translated into 20 languages. So let me introduce you writer and conservation architect, Suad Amiri. Suad will speak about reclaiming spaces for social change. The stage is yours.
Well, hello, everybody. And thank you all for organizing this timely conference. I'm very happy to be part of it. And I would like to take my time. My presentation will be divided actually into 3 parts. One part starts with the values of our vision, our values, our decisions and architects of our practices, how we see our practices and what are the means and what are the goals of the architectural practice. Second part will deal with REWAQ, Center for Architectural Conservation, which is located in Ramallah, Palestine, which I founded in 1991. And the third part will be a short video about REWAQ's work. I always like to be personal when I talk, so I will share with you some of my personal experiences. But let me start by saying this, that I see architecture actually as a tool and not as a goal. Sometimes we are all taught that architecture is a goal, meaning that we have to build a nice building somewhere in this world. I see architecture as a tool like many other tools that we can have in this world. It could be a painter, it could be painting, it could be writing, it could be a political activity. I think most important thing is to decide in our life whether we want to join. Do we want to reinforce the world and the powers of this world in which we are living in? Or do we want to challenge these forces and the world in which we are in? I'm sure if I ask you, are you happy with the world we are living in? We are all going to agree, no, we're not happy with it, but particularly because of the injustices that is happening in this world. And we all decide that, yes, we would like to change, to make a change in this world. And so for me, I think the most important thing, the decision or the most important value for me is really to value what we call, as you said, intersectional justice, and also what we call universal values. Many of us will think that we have Christian values, we have Jewish values, we have Muslim values, or we have American or French values. As far as I'm concerned, all of these are nonsense, actually. We have only one value, as far as I'm concerned, which is universal value. And what does universal value means? It only means one thing, that we really and truly believe that all human beings are equal in rights and share of resources that we have on this globe. And if we have this as a vision, then every work we are trying to do is to reach to those universal values. And I think that intersectional justice, if we talk what is common between a movement like Black Lives Matter or LGBT or global warming or the environment or poverty or women, for me, these are all the same. They are really the same kind of movements. They are all movements that are trying very hard to destructure, deconstruct an apartheid system that gives a certain color, a certain religion, a certain nationality, a certain gender, more rights than the others. So whatever we do in this world, we are trying to change this world by deconstructing these systems, apartheid systems. Now, when I graduated from the School of Architecture, I had 3 choices, actually. I was given 3 choices. Unfortunately, maybe this generation does not have these choices because of the unemployment that we are all facing. But I was given 3 choices: either to join an architectural office and contribute to the construction of new buildings, or I was actually offered a UN job to go to Bahrain and work as a UN organization. And the third one, I was living in Jordan. I grew up in Jordan as a Palestinian refugee. And the third option was for me to try and come and live in Palestine under occupation and start something in Palestine. I ultimately ended up choosing the most problematic and the most difficult choice, which is basically cross the Jordan River from the East Jordan to the West Jordan and come and live in Ramallah, in a city where I knew nobody. Believe me, not a single person I knew in this country. And I needed an Israeli permit to enter into this land, even though I am Palestinian, a permit that was in Hebrew, and I don't speak a word of Hebrew, so I had no idea what it said, but I trusted that it will get me into Palestine. And so I arrived here and I started working in documentation of architecture without architects. Being an architect, I was really interested in people who did work without us, basically, which is mostly the village architecture in Palestine. And as you will see in the film, maybe we could say that this act was a political act, it was a justice act, it was equality act, but at the end of the day, I opted to work and start a REWAQ Center for Architectural Conservation. Just to tell you a little bit, REWAQ is an NGO, non-government organization. It's not a profit organization. So again, you decide that you want to work in something that doesn't make profit. That's also a decision that you make in life. And I started this organization in which we started documenting what we have, basically, to understand what we have. It was triggered in a history of the Palestine-Israel conflict, that in 1948, actually, the Israelis bulldozed 420 villages. And as a kid, my father always talked about these 420 villages. So for me to come to Palestine and start a national register and find out that we still have 420 villages that we need to protect and save, that's what I opted to do by starting REWAQ. Now, REWAQ basically, just to put it in a nutshell, is trying to protect 50 historic centers and create these historic centers for the people who are living in the old cities. Normally, as you know, in most of the world, the people who are living in historic centers are the poor, the old, those who have no options of living in other places. So again, the decision you make to serve those people rather than to serve building new buildings was extremely important for me. Historically, it was important because I consider myself a product of this part of the world, the Mediterranean world. And if you ask me what my identity is, I can tell you I am partly Jewish, I am partly Christian, I am partly Muslim, I am partly Roman, I am partly Greek, I am partly Arab, I'm partly Muslim, I'm partly Mamluk, I am all of those. So for me, it is extremely important to protect all these levels when we work in Palestine. Unlike some people who would think that it's important just to protect the layer, the Jewish layer in this part of the world, or the Roman layer or the Muslim layer. I think this is a very myopic way of looking at our world. So it's important for us to look at history, be objective, and consider all of these layers as who we are. And this is what REWAQ does. How much time do I have? Because I am known to be very talkative and not consider the time. So anyway,
we can proceed with the video if you want, Suad, but you can just say one or two phrases. It's okay.
That's why I asked. Okay, basically, REWAQ is trying to revitalize these 50 villages, basically to provide housing for the poor, to create jobs, and I want to underline this, create jobs. The reason we succeeded is we managed to create jobs for the poor workers in Palestine. I will leave you with the video, and maybe later on, if you have more questions, you can ask me. Thank you so much.
I will share the video.
Thank you.
Okay.
The restoration of buildings has always been a dream of Regeneration. Because when Regeneration started, we didn't know anything. Not just we didn't know how many buildings there were in Palestine or where were they, we also didn't know how to restore them because the building knowledge was lost.
And we are young architects. We never planned our future. We never planned our cities. And suddenly we could plan our historic centers. And with the historic centers comes something else, which is the memory.
It all started with my childhood. I grew up in Jordan because in 1948 we became refugees like 90% of the population then. My father was always talking about his house in Jaffa. And as a child, I had to sort of construct Palestine, build models for our house, build images of whatever my father told me as a kid. My father always talked about the 420 villages that the Israelis destroyed. And that number was magic for me. When I came to the first time in my life to Palestine in '81 to teach at Birzeit University, I was intrigued that the number of villages were 420 villages that exist now in West Bank and Gaza. So I have a mission of protecting the remaining 50% of what has been destroyed. You see, the problem up till now, I think in people's mind, a historic building reminds them of poverty, of darkness, of dampness, and this is what we want to change.
With the urban expansion happening now in towns and in villages too, we're losing public spaces, we're losing open spaces, we're losing spaces that are accessible to everyone to go to.
We need a public space because this is the place for community to meet and to negotiate and to make a dialogue and to intervene in their future.
أهلا وسهلا فيكم جميعا في رواق في افتتاح فعاليات بناء رواق الرابع.
In 2001, unemployment rates were very high in Palestine. And that's why funders were putting money in job creation projects. And for us, building restoration is a quintessential job creation project.
I think that's where Regeneration made its major contribution, is to connect cultural heritage with job creation.
We create not only a joyful place to play, but a joyful place to produce and make money.
The minute we saw that through cultural heritage, the money we spend on a building, 90% of it goes really to the community, meaning that the people get work, they get a space, a nice space. People have to benefit from the cultural heritage.
We know now that restoration is not about houses, stones, and so on. What we are doing now is trying to create the proper infrastructure for social change.
After working on single buildings, we discovered it's not enough. So in order to save more buildings and have a larger impact, it was, okay, we need to work on a larger scale. We need to save towns as a whole.
We don't want to neither gentrify these historic centers, nor make them museums. We want the people who live there to help them in such a way that they can make use, their children can make use of the historic center.
Palestine only has its heritage. It's where our investment should be, and it's where our money will come from in the future.
Regeneration helps people in different ways, but what we are trying to do usually, we struggle or strive to find moments of hope that things can be better. And Regeneration really pinpoint these points of possibility, pinpoints these points of hope.
Thank you very much, Suad. It was a very interesting lecture and interesting video. So as we can understand it, ECOWEEK is writing actually history in striving to reconstruct not only buildings, but also the fragments of memories in order to redefine also the narrative of Palestine. And as your partner said, your ECOWEEK partner said, restoration is about creating also the proper infrastructure for social change. So in this context, I want you to share a short story of the family that actually moved in these projects, and how did their life changed?
You know, for a longest time, people thought that these buildings are really to be destroyed, and many have been destroyed, unfortunately. I think by convincing people that their kids can make a buck out of it, which is what basically job creation, they started feeling this, yeah, we can benefit. Also, we made an incredible marriage between the owner and the user. I think that's also was a key point. And thirdly, what you're asking about is the housing. Eventually, we came to the community and say, let's do a matching fund. Whatever you spend on your building, we're gonna spend the same amount. So if you put 1,000, we put 1,000, you put 5,000. And we could also calculate their money, because sometimes they don't have the cash. We can calculate it in labor. So they can have a cousin, they have a son, a father who is a plasterer. All of this is calculated. So it made it easy for them to contribute, but nothing is for free, because if you give something for free, people just want more. Slowly, actually, people started seeing the potential of living in these, what used to be dump places, by us actually starting with renovating the public spaces. We renovated public spaces, plazas, playgrounds for children was very important. Eventually, we reached to the housing, and people were amazed by just moving into these places and taking pride in them. But most important, that they have to be comfortable. Now they have heating, they have water. We are not romantic. We are not romantic about historic buildings. If I can't live in it, I don't expect anybody to live in it. So it really has to have what we call 18th century looks, but 21st century services.
Nice, interesting approach. Thank you very much, Suad.
Sure.
And back to you, Malu, for the next speaker. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. The speaker I'm about to introduce you next is professor in the Department of Architecture and the director of the Einaudi Center for International Studies at Cornell University. She received awards and fellowship from major institutions around the world, the last of which was the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University. She's the author of Landfill Istanbul, Architecture in Translation, Turkey, Modern Architecture in History, Open Architecture, Migration, Citizenship, and Urban Renewal of Berlin-Kreuzberg. And she has 2 upcoming books, Abolish Human Bands and Right to Heal. So please welcome or join me in welcoming virtually Ezra Action, who will give us a talk about right to truth and transitional justice memorials. Ezra.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to the whole team for inviting me. You can hear me, yes? Okay, I didn't hear now, so I'll just continue. So in the context of ongoing and recent conflicts and human-made disasters that we are going through, such as the disproportionate impact of public health crisis, police violence, rising fascism, deadly floods, explosions, extinctions, and so on, many societies are reminded of the pressing need to find conceptual frameworks for healing. And let me first say a few words about this book project that Madhu just mentioned, Right to Heal, where this presentation comes from. I should mention that when I settled on this title, the word healing was used much less and was actually received with skepticism. but I was inspired by some Black feminist writers' prose in selecting it. So during the recent events, I often came back to the premise that started this research. To insist on imagining the future may be the most meaningful resistance against the destructive powers in times of crisis. So my questions are, how reversible is damage due to internal social conflicts? How does a post-disaster society accomplish justice through architecture? If buildings have historically been the media through which ruling powers erect their monuments and inscribe their control at the expense of natural and social fabrics, can they also become platforms where societies move toward healing? So in this research, I try to expose critically both architecture's complicit and opportunistic role in conflicts, but also I want to demonstrate its creative potential toward a more meaningful reconstitution. So rather than a tall order for post-traumatic societies, the book's title, Right to Heal, is meant to criticize architectural practices that perpetuate crisis and also to contrast them to examples that envision social, global, and environmental justice. So one of my intentions is to show the interconnected histories of colonization, nationalism, and environmental extraction, their intersectionality, so to speak. So chapters, in a way, build on each other to show how present wounds have deep roots in history, and they can be traced to connected events throughout the past century as colonizing and industrializing empires dissolved into equally violent, purist nation states. So through the chapters, I hope to show that an individual's right to mourn for a dead relative is sometimes also a society's right to heal from state violence. A city's struggle to recover from deadly explosions is the same struggle to avoid economic crashes. A country's right to feed its population is also its right to heal from colonization and environmental extraction. Another country's right to heal from global war is also the world's right to recover from global warming. And the planet Earth's species' right to live is also nations' struggle to live together. So at this point, I would like to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. For today, Malu asked me to present the section on transitional justice memorials, whose relevance was recently reminded with the protests that followed George Floyd's murder by the police. So I hope it's moving. Recently toppled or removed monuments during these protests in Virginia, Boston, Alabama, Bristol, Antwerp, and other cities motivate us to discuss the future of memorials. So removing monuments from public spaces signifies the end of an era, a moment of transition, and the need for change. In this context, I would like to raise the topic about the future of commemoration after confronting the violence of the past. How do monuments take accountability for slavery, colonialism, and fascism, rather than simply celebrate history? How do they help healing from historical violence? So by way of an answer, I present some ideas today about what I will call transitional justice memorials. My implication is that US and countries in Europe that are confronting their histories of slavery, colonialism, old and new fascisms might indeed get some inspiration from the experience of countries with a history of transitional justice, such as South Africa, Argentina, Germany, Bosnia, Rwanda, and others. Many of these memorials were erected in response to the violation of right to truth. Recognized by international law, the right to truth oversees the right of relatives to know the truth about individuals who have been subject to human rights violations in the past, which have been obscured due to denial of accountability and the distortion of facts in official national histories. Truth and recognition of suffering is a prerequisite for healing. The term right to truth as part of an international law has a very specific meaning, but in the context of our post-truth age, where lies rather than facts can dictate the future, as we just witnessed in January 6th, I think we have to advocate for a newfound relevance of truth and the need to uphold it. So to define transitional justice in a nutshell, let me refer to Kofi Annan's words. It is the full range of processes and mechanisms associated with a society's attempts to come to terms with a legacy of large-scale past abuses in order to ensure accountability, serve justice, and achieve reconciliation. Today, transitions from military regimes, civil wars, genocides, apartheids, as well as healing from colonization and slavery may be the topics of multidisciplinary field of transitional justice. Mechanisms include truth and reconciliation commissions, trials, reparations, compensation programs, and institutional reforms. For instance, after the toppling of the statue of King Leopold II, Belgium just instituted a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for reparations to ex-colony Congo. During the monuments debate this summer, Angela Davis also spoke about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission as a start in the US. After the events of January 6, such commissions seem ever more essential for repair and reparations. So transitional justice memorials should be different from war and heroism monuments, as they come to terms with internal violence, with state actions that violated the rights of citizens whom they claim to protect. Architects are usually excluded from the decisions over the needs, sites, representatives, and narratives of memorials, only to be brought in at the last stage to design the physical environment. Another implication of my talk is that architects can take more proactive roles by engaging with accountability debates at earlier stages. So I will discuss these memorials from the perspective of site, form, program, funding, and procedure. And let's start with the site. Transitional justice memorials are no longer statues of a handful of heroes on pedestals, but complex conceptions of sites where sculpture, architecture, landscape design, earth art, performance, and educational programs might be combined. They usually should not be monuments to single individuals who are never perfect anyway, but to healing ideas and values. These memorials may be located both in found and constructed sites, namely both spaces where the trauma actually happened and symbolic spaces that would be associated with healing by virtue of the memorial. There are mixed opinions about apology memorials that repurpose torture spaces. While such spaces strongly reveal historical violence, they may perpetuate trauma rather than heal it. The location of the incomplete memory park in Argentina at the former torture chamber in Buenos Aires raised hesitations exactly for this reason. Conversely, in Chile, exposing and appropriating the violation spaces became a major transitional step, such as the uncovering of this villa as a secret police torture chamber. An additional concern is the site's visibility. A familiar critique of memorials is their participation in forgetting and whitewashing despite their opposite intention, and the choice of the location is not a trivial factor here. A frozen, singular site in an obscure place is more likely to trivialize atrocities than multiple sites that are constantly animated with educational and art programs. The number and accessibility of Holocaust memorials all over the world are more likely to disseminate the necessary reminder, never again. In Chile, multiple memorial sites were allocated, such as several stadiums and universities, in addition to approximately 250 places to the victims of Pinochet. Most of them emerged with the determination of local communities, such as this one, where dozens of mosaics were completed by the relatives of the victims. Another consideration is the physical design. From a formal standpoint, transitional justice memorials have shaken architecture's confidence in monumentality. Modern monumentality had been a long and periodically rising topic in architecture. Memorials and human rights debates grew in a synchronized way since the 1990s. Official state monuments had manipulated collective memory by overemphasizing and stabilizing the dominant voice, and thus by taking part in cultural repression. In US, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial by Maya Lin served as one of the most recognized turning points. In sharp contrast to the classist scale and representation strategies of its surrounding monuments, this memorial is hardly visible from a distance. Her gesture of inscribing on the walls more than 58,000 names of men and women who died in the war makes it a memorial to individual memories rather than to official narratives symbolized in the sacrifice of an unknown soldier. So writing names of victims on walls to resist their erasure has proven to be an effective commemoration mode in Bosnia, Chile, Uruguay, Argentina, and others. During the design of the monument to the victims of state terrorism in Argentina, it was a matter of controversy to decide which names to write on the wall. Acknowledging those who were subject to enforced disappearance after 1969, as opposed to 76, would change the level of accountability for the inner structures of the state. A new law secured the inscription of all names that were revealed by Truth Commission, but the memorial nevertheless left 21,000 slabs empty, gesturing to an even higher number. The UVA memorial in US to enslaved laborers are also gestures towards the need for further research and exploration to find those names that have been hidden. In Germany, a counter-monumental turn in public art took place with Holocaust memorials. Erecting monuments to Holocaust victims presented its own set of problems, given both the historical and etymological connection between monuments and memory, and given also the association of monumentality with power, grandeur, prestige, and glory, how could one commemorate the Holocaust victims or any victims with a monumental expression? Or to follow Horkheimer and Adorno, if the Holocaust was a major scar on the face of modernity, raising a serious concern about its inherent inability to confront otherness, how could one continue to use conventional monumental practices to represent it? So after the 1990s, artists commemorated traumas with counter-monumental forms. For example, Gers and Gers conceived their disappearing monument against fascism as a pillar that was gradually lowered as citizens signed their names to indicate their rebellion against fascism. This interactive counter-monument was designed to vanish eventually, challenging the very notion of permanence and stability. Daniel Libeskind Studio and Peter Eisenman both use counter-monumental formal strategies in their different ways, such as the spatial and programmatic void, the lack of a visible entrance, the lack of privileged viewpoint, and the uncanny interchangeability between formal associations of the rational and irrational. And intertextuality between apology memorials speak to the importance of transnational solidarity. In addition to the wall of names and the metaphor of lynching, the Memorial for Peace and Justice in Alabama reference the Berlin Memorial. So in other words, transitional justice memorials bring visitors face to face with victims' experience rather than the victors' propaganda. And memorials to the Rwanda genocide have added a new layer. Unlike those that use replicas or represent traumas through mediated experiences, the Kigali Genocide Memorial Center displays actual human remains and bones of dead bodies. The Rwanda Genocide Memorials take their power from the architecturalization of the index of violence. Third, I would suggest the program as another consideration. Let's agree that additional research, education, and art programs that keep memory sites informative, social, and active, and that turn accountability into an evolving open process are more meaningful steps in the struggles toward healing than frozen and isolated memorials. The Memorial Museum thus emerged as a new program such as the ones in South Africa, Colombia, Hungary, Rwanda, and Chile. These museums usually put victims' experience at the center and emphasize historical archives. Despite their role in healing, however, transitional justice and its memorials are prone to many unresolved contradictions. One of the dilemmas generates from the question of funding. Some human rights organizations, such as the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, refused a state-sponsored memorial because they conceived it as a step towards releasing the state from its own accountability. Current government's opportunism to whitewash crimes through a memorial is a serious concern. However, the lack of state funding throws these memorials into the market economy if they are to reach a broader public, and this creates its own contradictions. Memorials created after the end of dictatorships in Argentina and Chile were co-opted to the memory market as an extension of the simultaneous neoliberalization of the world. In a context where memory groups reject government support and need to survive in market economy, trauma sites get integrated to tourism industry, and the never again motto is turned into a brand. So if the state is not involved in memorials to the victims of state violence, the result is not an apology, and the state gets away from its financial burden, while memorialization is left to its own devices in a neoliberal world. If the state is too involved, it dictates the message in its own partiality and in a very imperfect world that is prone to continuing hierarchies. So in this context, societies need to find new ways where the state is involved in the funding, but the narrative is democratized by involving many groups, especially those that have been victimized. At the same time, critical historiography needs to endure so that justice and peace building becomes a continually updated process. Another contradiction is the implied ranking of suffering due to the unequal monetary resources, space, and scale granted to different memorials. The visual supremacy of Holocaust memorials at the expense of other victims exposes this contradiction. While the Holocaust memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe fortunately takes a vast space at the center of unified Berlin, other Nazi victims such as Roma and homosexual populations hardly get commemorated in the same way. Moreover, the Holocaust memorials in immigrant neighborhoods such as Berlin's Kreuzberg failed to triangulate German, Jewish, and immigrant memories, even though many intellectuals drew connections between historical and contemporary discriminations against the Jewish and Muslim populations. So the exclusionary practice in the selective inclusion of victims brings me to the topic of identity politics. On the one hand, most conflicts are due to ethnic and racial discriminations, and truth-telling processes need to expose colonization and racialization if societies are ever to confront their mistakes. On the other hand, the final goal of transitional justice is perpetual peace building to put an end to conflicts. It's a delicate reconciliation after which all involved parties shake hands in peace, so to speak. Any practice or memorial that fuels conflicts by reversing or constructing a new hierarchy between groups, or planting seeds of violence, or equating revenge with equality, any of these are bound to distort this final intention. We might also ask, how could the architecture discipline give a forward momentum to transitional justice today? Memorial is not the only medium, but a memorial can indeed start the process of justice rather than conclude it. For example, the first plate at the Tanforan Assembly Center to commemorate the interned Japanese Americans during World War II was placed before the official apology, which was followed by the reparations that were granted in 1988. In other words, it was the memorial that started the justice process and demanded apology and reparation rather than the other way around. The UVA memorial to enslaved laborers may have a similar effect. Or the Chicago Torture Justice Center that seeks to address the traumas of police violence has initiated the design of a memorial first and is now asking the mayor for the money and land to construct it. So to conclude, unlike remedial or distributive justice that tries to close a gap between inequalities by allocated resources slightly more evenly, transitional justice is a little bit different. It's invested in tracing the historical causes of this gap much more precisely and bringing justice against past violations. It has a chance in moving toward fairer financial and moral reparations. In this context, my argument is that memorials to come may also imply transitions to come. So thank you very much for listening. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Ezra. Thank you. Very interesting lecture. Coming up next is the co-director of DAR, Decolonizing Architecture Art Research, an architectural art collective that co-founded in 2007 with Alessandra Balatesti and Yael Weizman in Palestine. I personally had the chance to go through the pages of their latest publication, Permanent Temporariness, an archive of 15 years of research and experimentation. So, co-founder of Campus in Camps in 2012, let me introduce you the architect, artist, and educator Sandy Hilal. Sandy will speak about decolonizing fascist colonial heritage. The stage is yours.
Thank you all. I'm so happy for this invitation and happy to be among you. And actually today I will tell you a story of the project. Normally it's not that I speak about the project itself, but the story of the project. And then if you are interested more in digging how the project took place, you can still be finding everything on our website. And today, actually, the story I would like to tell you is the story of a project called Verso, an entity of decolonization, towards an entity of decolonization in English. And it is a project that is actually bringing very much the concept of colonization and migration integration together, and how can we today actually link the whole idea of being refugees and migrants today, and how this was affected and still being affected by the fascist sort of narration and architecture. But in order normally actually to tell a story, sometimes it's important to understand from where to begin it. I believe beginning of stories are very important, and each of us trace the beginning of the story in a complete different manner. And the project towards entity of decolonization is a project that was made in collectivity, and most probably each one of us that was involved in this project will tell the story a bit differently. But I will tell you my story because it's important also to understand different positions. And my story maybe of this project, I would like, instead of tracing it from an invitation that came from the Quadriennale of Rome, where the project is presented today, I would love actually to trace it of 4 years ago when we had to leave Palestine and move back to Europe. And actually, we had to leave Palestine exactly because we were living a life of permanent temporariness, and my partner in life and work, Alessandra Balatesti, never managed to get any family reunion. So as a family, we were all the time feeling that we were precarious there, and he had to go, each time he had to obtain a 3 months visa. And actually our time in Palestine almost expired after 10 years. And we, for many reasons, we had to leave to Sweden. And definitely, this was a big moment of crisis for our practice, but for ourselves. And I remember I was very much worried and afraid by moving to Sweden. And I was asking myself, why all these worries? And what is it that is worrying me that much? And after a while, actually being there, I understood that what was worrying me the most is to become a guest again. And what I mean by this is that when you arrive to Europe, I guess that the first action that you are pointed at as migrant or as someone outside of, or how they call it in Italian, extracomunitario, is to remind you every day that you are only a guest. So my obsession in Sweden became to be what will happen with me the 4th day I am in Sweden. And I would explain why exactly the 4th day, because in the Arab world, in Arabic, we say you are a guest for 3 days and then you become an object of pettiness. You know, people keep you because they have pity on you. And in other languages and cultures is that sometimes in Sweden, for example, guests like fish, the 4th day they smell bad. Or I mean, in many cultures, each cultures find its own way to express that you can be a guest for 3 days. And then I suddenly began to question what will happen with me the 4th day I am in Sweden. And in there I created a project called the living room, right of host, but I am not telling you today about this project. I only would like to tell you about the concept of this project where I was claiming my right to be a host. And I worked with large community of refugees, where we try to understand how through architecture we can claim our right to host. And we created what we call public living rooms, where it's not us being integrated in the Swedish public, but creating our own publics and parallel publics, multiple publics, where everybody has the right both to be a host and a guest. So you are not taking away your right to host the moment you arrive to Europe. And for me, the first act of colonization, the moment I arrived to Europe, is that I was taking away my right to host, right? And this brings me to Italy and to the project of towards an entity of decolonization, because actually my main fear, I guess, was very much a result of almost 15 years of life in Italy. And in there, I sort of, the way I put it is that when I arrived to Italy, I was naive enough and I signed the contract of integration because they convinced me and convinced many others like me that if I would become as similar possible as an Italian, as what the image of an Italian should be, then I will become Italian. Indeed, I bought this. I signed the contract and I began to, and all what we call assimilation, right? I began to get assimilated into Italy, and to a point that I think personally I become more Italian than my own Italian husband. I love cooking Italy. I speak Italian. I wrote my PhD in Italian. I taught in Italy. So name it all. I guess that if I am an example of integration, I would tick all the boxes. Yet Italian, I have never been fully accepted, right? So what happened really? What is happening? And in this, I will take you to the first visit that we did in Sicily to begin our field trip, the beginning of our field trip to create the project towards an entity of decolonization. And we went there with an attempt to go and visit 8 villages that were created during the period of fascism. And they were created by what was called then entity of colonization. And it is the same entity, actually, that also built a lot of colonies in Libya and in other places. And in that sense, if you would think about it, in the mind of fascism, Sicily was to be colonized and eventually modernized and to bring civilization to Sicily the same way it meant to bring civilization to Libya. And this will take you to a lot of internal colonization in Italy. And this, of course, after working together, both me and my partner, he is Southern Italian, and we were working together for more than 15 years about how we practice decolonization today. What does it mean for us as architects today to practice decolonization? And suddenly in this project, towards an entity of decolonization, we came together from 2 very interesting points of view. One is Southern Italian dealing with internal colonization and willing to decolonize Italy in order to be able actually to claim space and to free himself from being Southern colonized Italian. And for me, actually, it was an attempt to break how can I put it, to break what I signed 15 years ago with the Italian government of integration, because I feel that it was very unjust contract that they were offering, and they are still offering all migrants and refugees and extra-communitarians that are coming to Italy. And the attempt was, if we don't bring decolonization, we cannot ever, never come back to Italy. And here, why it brings me very much to the fascist architecture, because you would understand going through all the villages that fascism built in Sicily, you would realize, first of all, it's intact. So, I mean, fascist architecture in Italy was kept almost as it is, and there is so little criticism towards history, I mean, towards any historical building, no matter if it was good or bad history. In Italy, anything the day after that becomes heritage, it is heritage, and it's to be kept no matter what is the message that is creating. And I feel that there is a very problematic issue of actually not being critical towards the non-ability of being critical towards history, right? So how is it possible to work within this context? But in the same time, because of this, Italy is an interesting laboratory because it keeps all its buildings and memorials, all of them, to a point that some of them is really unacceptable. I mean, 4 meters image of Mussolini is still in the wall as if nothing is happening, right? We arrive to the extreme in that sense. And, you know, arriving to these borghi, we first of all, our naive idea as usual was to think maybe these borghis, as a way of decolonizing them, they need to be lived by refugees, they need to be inhabited by who is really owning it, etc., etc. But then we realize it's all the time we think that the solution comes from other places, right? From if refugees would be hosted in these borghis, then we solve the problem. The problem doesn't come from other places. The first beginning of solving that problem is that when people like me and Alessandro that worked for years on decolonization would begin to solve it for themselves. We cannot pretend that it's solved by others on our behalf. It doesn't work this way. So what we decided, what we thought is that it's our tasks, first of all, to find out who are other Italians today that are interested in decolonizing Italy and create a movement. We begin to call it towards an entity of decolonization. And actually it all born out of visiting one village called Borgorizza. And in Borgorizza, it's really intact. It has been restored 4 years ago. And in each of these borghis, you will find post office, Casa del Fascio, and other things. But among others, you will find what they used to call entity of colonization. And there is the building of the entity of colonization that is actually intact. It's there. And with the municipality of Carlentini, we actually are building this project that might go for years now. The first one would begin this summer, where we would like to establish what we call the school, the entity of decolonization. And it is a summer school that would take place once a year in Sicily, in Borgorizza, in the entity of colonization, transforming it into an entity of decolonization in order for us actually to be able to come back to Italy. And here I would like to stress that we only believe that fascism is something that was before, or its history as many would claim, and it's ended. It doesn't, it's not ended, because people like me, even if they tried for 15 years to become Italian, they didn't manage, because this narration is still alive, because there is a very fixed idea of who are the Italians today, who are, and this was, of course, a departure before fascism. I'm not saying that a departure only with fascism, but fascism actually brings it to earth on who are the Italians. And unfortunately, there has been no process of defascistization in Italy, no process of decolonization in Italy, to a point that even if you would become an Italian in your mind and in other people's perception, it's still, you are not Italian, because the only Italian is what fascism describes as Italian today in Italy. And I think that it's our task today is to begin this process of decolonization. And we will begin from a very small building of a school of decolonization in the entity of decolonization in Borgorizza in Sicily. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Really inspiring. I really hope this summer camp will work and happen for many years. I want only to quote Alessandro Petti from your latest publication, where he says that what the media calls the refugee crisis is in reality the inability of Europe to come to terms with 500 years of colonialism. And I couldn't agree more, actually. So I would just like a final comment from your side, if there is a real answer on what should we do with fascist heritage. So should we demolish it? Should we reuse it? reorient it? You know, what is your point of view? Just a few words. Thank you.
I think before even speaking what to do with fascist architecture, we should ask ourselves what to do with fascist narrations, because it's there where it's ask before, because the building can be actually turned against itself, but we can turn it against itself only the moment that we began to accept the decolonizing, or the re-narration, I would rather call it, the re-narration of fascist, and the way that we are narrating today, Italy and Italians, and the way we are narrating today certain issues, and then maybe exactly because the fascist architecture actually embody in itself, and it's very clear. I mean, when you go there in these places, it's fascism is such present there to a point that you cannot avoid thinking that it's there, right? So I believe, for example, doing a school in one of these borgies is way more effective rather than doing it somewhere else, because somewhere else you can still believe that you manage to go beyond fascism, while these buildings are reminding you all the time that fascism is still there as a narration. And in other countries, actually, where it was completely demolished, you tend to forget it. So the Italian model is quite an interesting one. But how can we challenge before even challenging architecture? Because as architects, we believe that if we will reuse the place, and as I mentioned before, when we thought if refugees would come and live in these villages, then we solve the problem. It doesn't, I don't think that we solve the problem. What needs to be solved first is the narration that these buildings are embodied, and and they are really the ghosts that are still living in these buildings. So if we want to inhabit these buildings, we should first of all to throw the ghosts before us coming in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandy. Malu, up to you for the final speaker.
So the last but not least speaker of our panel is an architect and designer whose work ranges from interior architecture to interactive design, from illustration to activism. In 2007, she established Francesca Perani Enterprise, an award-winning studio based in Bergamo, Italy. But she is also the founder and curator of the activist project Rebel Architette, advocating for equality in architecture. I would like to welcome Francesca Perani. She will tell us about Rebel Architette, telling us how they are trying to detoxing architecture from inequalities through a plural act.
Thank you, Maria Luisa, and thank you everybody from ECOWEEK. I'm really pleased as our team to be here with you, and we have been truly inspired by all the talks since now, the lectures. So today I'm going to talk about our work and the way we are trying to, as you said, Maria Luisa, detox architecture from injustice, because we believe that we cannot be real changer of the built environment if we still have a profession that is discriminating gender and not only. So this is why we are going to present you what we have been trying to do. So I'm going to share the screen and show you some of the works that we have been carrying. Just 1 second. Can you see my screen? Yes? Yes. Okay. So detoxing, 1 second. So yes, as I said, we started with gender disparities, but obviously we embrace all the discrimination that can be in architecture. So first of all, I'm here representing the group and is a newly formed association, but we have been working as digital activists since 2017. We are roughly 14 architects from Italy, but not only. We have Jimena Romero from Guatemala and also Natalia Patlan from Mexico, among us. So this is the core group that is working on our association, but we also are achieving a lot of information through the help and these collaborative networks that is about having rebel, what we call Rebel Advisor 56, that are helping us finding excellence in architecture done by female architects. So it's important for us to say that we are truly an international network, and we are also linked with other architecture associations that have got equity in mind as we do, and this is part of what we've been achieving. Our story started in Italy because it all happened when we, myself, Silvia Vitali, Cristina Brembilla, we were just 3 architects, 3 friends. We thought that it was the right time in 2017 to ask for the professional stamp in the feminine. So we were used to have only the professional stamp called architetto, which means male architect. And we decided that it was about time to have also the professional stamp in the feminine. This action was very easily accepted by our professional body, that was Bergamo, from Bergamo County, and so this was the first time that it was used in Italy. And as I said before, even myself, I was used to call myself like a man, and I didn't even know. So it was for us just a way to say, okay, female architects are now so many in the profession, and we also need to use a professional name that defines us, that is already in the Italian language. And that it was also not used only due to the lack of the usage of feminine forms for many professional job titles that in the past were only done by male. So these news were widely covered by media, and it was covered in a positive way. So everybody was saying, wow, they won the fight about getting the stamp, the professional stamp in the feminine. But on the other side, it was not really true, because we didn't fight for it. But what we found is that on the social network, this the use of the female name of architecta, caused a real social shock. So everybody was really questioning, why are they doing here this, and what is the reason for it? Why can't we just stay using architetto as a male name? And we were really we were really worried about this, and the kind of reaction that we got online were very, very intuitive, as you can see, very, very simple, like, well, I don't want to use it because I never used it. I would never use it because it sounds very badly, and maybe it's not even Italian. So these were the kind of comment that we also see, unfortunately, we also see even last week and yesterday, when another professional body accepted this. But the most significant comment that has been made was this one. There was somebody saying, after all the efforts I made to be called an architetto, there is no way I start again with the architetta. And this was really the phrase that made us thinking about how difficult and frustrated can be to be a female architect in Italy. And we know why is that, because we have measurable gaps that we can declare to you. And it's important for us to let you know that in Italy, we have the same amount of architects that you can find in USA. And we have 1/3 of the all architects that you have in Europe. At the same time, we have a very high percentage of female architects in Italy, 43%. But also when you look at the under 30 years old architects, they also are 56%. So we can also say that Italian architecture is very female, but at the same time is still very invisible. And is invisible because of the gaps that I was telling you about. And I'm sure it's not only in Italy, but I can just tell you what happens in Italy. We have women, their income is 37% less than the one that men receive. And this is due to the time that they can deliver to the profession. Normally in Italy, not only architects, but women, they spend 4 hours a day for family care and housework management, while men normally in a week they spend roughly 1 hour. So you can understand that in such a harsh and competitive profession as the Italian one, women can't succeed very easily. But what's really inspired us as well was the reading of Where Are the Women Architects by Despina Stratigakos. And she was saying on her book that 1/3 of the architects that drop off the profession, even if they don't have a family, they do so because of the lack of role models. So what we did was starting an online research that was then going to be delivered also online. And we decided that we wanted to concentrate our work on role models. And we did it not only through a research online, but also by word of mouth actions and through the help of all the advisors that you saw before. Our targets still are students and young professionals. So we hope we can change the way they are going to see the profession in the future, and also journalists and event and jury organizers. What we had to also decide when we did our selection of role models was also the values that we were going to follow. So for us, it's very clear now that from an individual success, we went to a plural success. So what I mean is that the values that we've been looking at were definitely the standard one, like having won awards, having won competitions, publication, having done important teaching or research. But at the same time, when we started, and it was 2017, we also thought about the fragility of the environment and also the fragility of the global coexistence. So for us, success was more in a plural way, where community good score more than individual success or profit. So we in our role models, women architects, we see female that have been working on, architects that have been working on sustainability, social integration, and equality and justice. And this has been the way we've been selecting all these women architects. And now you see just few. And we decided to post one architect a day on our social network. And at the same time, because we started on May 2017, this work was going to be delivered completely with 365 architects by the Biennale of Venice. And this is something that happened. And also through a very generous contact that we got with Caroline James and Louise Braverman, we also understood what sisterhood truly means. They asked us to be part of the committee organizing the flash mob at the Biennale on 2018, asking for equal rights for women architects. So really, this was just an occasion to get in touch with amazing architects again. And all the work has been of the research that we did is delivered on a book that is called Architette, Women Architects, Here We Are. And that is on open source and has been viewed by more than 20,000 people from around the world since now. And also the website that is now our main tool. So I was really interested in what Suad Amiri said just before. Architecture is also a tool, or is also designing tool for others. So we hope we can through the democratization of data, we can, in a sort of way, decolonize also the future of architecture. This is how we express ourselves. We use Instagram filter. We keep on saying that we can have a different kind of architecture. These are some of other role models. Some are very well known, as well as some of them have been working on countries that not normally get so media coverage, and also young architects. What we found that was quite interesting, that among the excellence in design, we found that internationally 56% were studios directed by a sole woman, and then 35% by men and women composition, and then 9% were full female team. When we look at the Italians, we found a completely different situation where almost half of the architects that can achieve a very high standard level of visibility and also success, in a way, as we described it, are mainly in a man and woman situation, like a couple situation. And now that we reached 130 studios, we also saw that this percentage is also rising as well. So we sometimes say that there is a lot of love in architecture, but at the same time we are a bit worried that this is implicitly saying that to be an architect, you also have to marry another architect, and this is not a joke, unfortunately. So. About that, I want to also tell you that there is a fantastic Instagram profile and research that is called Couplings and is mapping all the couples in architecture. And just to let you know, something else that we are carrying that we are really fond of is Time for 50, Time for Equality. This is a report that we did in 2018, and we saw that we need to ask for equal participation of male and female speakers, because out of 411 panels that have been held in architecture in Italy, 37% were males. And when we say males, it's about having also conferences that have maybe 20 speakers and they're all men. And this didn't happen just in 2018 and 17, but it's still happening every day in Italy. So this is still something we have to ask for. We've been trying to push with this campaign throughout many ways of protest, always quite gentle, I would say. And we keep on asking for justice in architecture, also pushing on the use of the gender language to professional titles. And so therefore also the professional stamp that is not accepted in many professional bodies, as Bologna, Massa Carrara, Teramo, and Termi. And so we help who is asking for it through an open source template that we built. So we still think that we have to talk about a professional name declined in the feminine that is really telling you also the fact that to make architecture an equitable space, we are also fighting for our own name. So I just want to, I know that the time is super short, but I want to tell you that what we learn in our 3 years experience is that the privilege that we have now is really the alliances that we are growing, and we are growing, and all the people that is helping us, and all the ambassador that we have. And what we want to leave you with is with this statement that is fare spazio, making space, not only grabbing it for yourself. We can change architecture if we are not just looking at our own work, but sharing and supporting the others. And fare spazio, I know, is a statement that also Maria Luisa always used. And thank you very much for having me today. And I hope I've been quite clear, even if very fast.
Thank you so much for your brilliant presentation. I want to ask you super quickly just one thing, since we know the situation in Italy is so difficult. Something for, let's say, the women architects who are listening to us, the Italian one. What can we do if we would like to change our stamp from architetto to architecta? What shall we do? What can we do?
If we want to, allora, if you want to change your stamp, you just need to ask your professional body, because it's the only one that can do so. And we have been helping anybody that was asking. So we give a specific request that we know is quite effective. And then we just have to hope that the professional body will say that we can use it professionally. But at the same time, I think that luckily, many young architects are already using this name, so they already know that is the right way to be called, and so they're already on the right on a self consciousness on how important it is also to use a professional name that we never used. So even myself, I got used to it, but now I feel very lucky that we can share it also as professional.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Francesca.
My pleasure.
I think we could ask a question for Suad. There was a question from the audience and one from Francesco. Just if you can say a few words. Actually, the question is about the NGO. What are the financial resources for every project? And the other question is if users have, something to say about the reconstruction process.
Okay, as far as finances are concerned, for the longest time, actually, Sweden, where Sandy Hilal used to be our main funder from the culture point of view. Later on 2000, when we proposed conservation and rehabilitation as a job creation, then it was seen more as an urgent matter in Palestine, and the funding started coming from different resources. Now we have resources from the Arab Foundation or the Arab Foundation in Kuwait. But there is a lot of little projects funded by different, the British Council, for example. Sometimes the Germans take one. Most of the European countries, except for Italy, I must say, even though our connection with Italy is the strongest. So the funding varies. There is also local money. We do fundraising from the Palestinian community and the Arab community. But I would say the bulk really right moment is from the British Museum, British Council and the Arab Fund.
Okay.
The users, what do the users say? Actually, we are very happy. Two people are very happy with us. I always say we created the perfect marriage. We all know that perfect marriage doesn't exist actually in reality, or a happy marriage. And what I mean by that is we have asked owners who own a building to give the users the right of using that building. So as an owner, you don't really pay for your building. You sort of rent it out for 10 years. Then we ask NGOs from that site to use the building for free. They have to be an NGO, non-profit organization. And it is Riwaq's architects and Riwaq team that raised the funds for it. So the user is using it for free for 10 years. After 10 or 15 years, they start renting, paying rent. So I must say that users are very happy about this equation. So is the owner. The only responsibility, actually is on RUAC to raise the funds for such buildings.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. I think we're going to proceed to the next panel, panel 1. So Francesco and Elias, the stage is yours.
Hi everyone, thank you, Sophia. We'll now proceed to the first panel, and I will be moderating together with Francesco, and I would like to introduce, of course, Francesco first, because Francesco was not introduced, so we have to be fair. Francesco is an architect, an educator, and an design based in Rome. He's the director of the University of Arkansas Rome program, the European hub of the University of Arkansas, and a professor of integrated architectural design and restoration. Francesco is a member of the executive committee of the Green Building Council in Italy and the founder and president of the GBC Lazio chapter. Francesco, I'm handing you the microphone to introduce our speaker. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Elias. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the beautiful presenters that we just heard in the first part of this event. It's always a pleasure working with you. I still remember the first edition of ECOWEEK in Rome in 2012, which actually hopefully will take place again now in the real world.
In the beautiful Villa Taverna.
In the Palazzo Taverna,
Palazzo
yes,
Taverna,
yes,
Palazzo
yes.
Taverna,
We're
yeah,
so
yeah.
fortunate
Indeed.
of being located in the historic center of Rome, not too far from the Pantheon that today is virtually behind our screen. So yes, and obviously a big thank you to Maria Luisa for involving us in the organization of this event. The panel that we're going to start now, as you probably have seen on the website, has a focus on the professional practice in a certain way. And so today we're going to have 3 guests who will, talk to us about the topic of this conference from their perspective. I would start with Nasrin Mohiti Azli. I hope I pronounce your name correctly.
Yes.
Welcome, Nasrin. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And Nasrin is a part of a firm that is based in Rome. It's called Orizzontale. It's a firm that is actively working on public space and experimental projects across the field of architecture, urban planning, public art, and self-construction. Actually, I still remember one of your installations that was placed in the courtyard of the Maxi Museum few years ago. And so I will start asking you the question, Nasrin. So today, we discuss a lot about the value, this concept of values, and obviously, in particular, this idea of justice. So how would you address this topic, okay, specifically with the idea of maybe engaging people in the design process of public spaces, since your firm and your research in particular, it's so focused on this topic?
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you to Elias and the ECOWEEK organization for inviting us. Do you hear me? Because virtual meetings sometimes can be a little bit tricky about the connection. So I will speak about Orizzontale, of course, and I will make a small introduction, and I will speak more about the philosophy that drives our work, because I think it's really important to understand the whole picture of what we do. So, do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, nice. So we are witnessing the consequences of a solid process of individualism that is related to our economical system. based on consumption and private ownership. Urban planning has favored a process of awakening of public spaces fruition, limiting it to the function of connecting private spaces. Thus, the public experience, and we can see it also nowadays with the new pandemic issue, is shifting from a traditional public spaces to semi-public ones. So many people prefer to spend free time into guarded and closed spaces such as supermarket, for example, shopping malls, rather than in parks or squares. In the latest month, we gave back a value to public space that we were almost forgetting as a society, let's say. The high-speed rhythm of urban daily life and consequently of urban environments is an additional Boyard system that is discouraging us as individuals to enjoy public space. And the third element is the advent of electronic communication technologies is changing deeply our habits, both in a positive sense and in a negative sense too. With internet consumption and home-based entertainment, we feel at ease in our cozy home, avoiding to spend time in the outdoor spaces, which are the unknown realm in which sometimes we feel insecure to walk in. These elements are reflecting in public space in which privatization is increasing as well as control. We need to keep in mind that also virtual spaces are not as free as we imagine. Race and class segregation and exclusion are strongly present in spaces that may seem public. At the same time, however, the sense of community is surviving and evolving as there is a content trend to develop community-based urban transformation processes. In fact, and we saw it this in the last as well in the last year, many organizations, institutions, associations and groups of people around the world are reclaiming public space and becoming promoters of its reactivation. So we start from the point and the value that to rebuild communities, we need to inhabit public space and interact within it and with the communities. So again, I present myself, and thank Francesco for introducing me. I am Nasrin from Horizontale, and we are an architecture collective based in Roma. And we started our journey in March 2010 with an action in public space, because we thought that it was time to start inhabiting it and reconstructing it. We are 7 people, and we are really diverse, and we founded a collective. So the choice of forming a collective is important as well, because this was driven mostly by a natural attitude and will of doing things together without a rigid hierarchy. The collective expresses somehow the subject of our architecture, and we think, in fact, that architecture is a collective act. Indeed, we build up places for free interactions, and we try to build ourselves, our spaces and our installation, but we are building up networks and collaboration with experts in different parts of Europe as well as the world, and we try to bring on more complex architecture organization and to give room to plurality. So working together is difficult, but we think that the challenge of our time is to develop the skill of collaborating and to develop the skill of hosting diversity and plurality, even though if maybe we do not agree with that kind of plurality and with diversities that we face. In general, we try to involve people in the spatial transformation processes at different levels and times. Sometimes the collaboration in some projects consists of defining the use and the configuration of the space. For Gondwana, for example, the wheel module weren't possible to be moved by one person only. We had to be in a group to move them. And you so had to interact with other people and to decide how to reorganize the square. So you had to find a common ground with someone different from you. We try as well to make space to host ordinaries and extraordinariness, like the project that you mentioned, that was also pretty complex. We try to incorporate always an exchange and a sharing of knowledge of what we do. For this reason, we open up building sites, and we think that the construction is a key point, both under the viewpoint of a physical and material construction and also an immaterial construction. So we may say that we construct spaces inhabiting it, and we explore the voids and the threshold spaces of the cities, which are suspended in time, and that they are not felt as owned by anybody. As well, from the immaterial part, let's say, we build up storytelling and we imagine multiversal identities to spaces. We try to build metaphors physically and also kind of literally, like in some projects, like in Iceberg, for example, Perestrello. And we try to use the learning by living and building together approach, because we believe that theory and practice are strictly connected one to the other. You have to get the ideas, but you have also to empirically feel what you are thinking in your mind as an architect. So also for this reason, we think that individuals, groups, association, and entrepreneurs should be always involved in the architecture process to cooperate and to imagine programs of activities for a space. We build up the space to host such a diversity and to host programs. Of course, we need to share the values. So it's not as we seek to any value to occur. We always seek to a value that brings freedom of speech, diversity as well, and respect in all the kind of complex social fabric we have and we face. So the act of collective building is an intense form of collaboration. And we think that in this way, if we open this collaboration with professionals from different backgrounds, as well as with experts of spaces that are inhabited, which are represented by the inhabitants of the spaces, we can close up and we can shorten the distances that separate people, diverse and different people, and also people from the space and the places of the, let's say, of our environment and context. Collaboration accompanies us in many aspects, and from our practice to our architecture, let's say, subject. And so we seek both, we seek this in our architecture and working method. Plurality and diversity, we know that can bring to also unbalanced situation and conflict, but we do embrace as well conflict. We think that conflict is actually the starting point to find a common ground within society. If we do not stand for our, let's say, social instances as communities and individuals, if we do not find debates in these spaces, then we believe that society evolution could have, let's say, a start and a stop. So these are some examples. I prefer to give you an overview of the philosophy of our collective, and so also under the subject of interstitial justice. I think that, yeah, to try toward this method is to give room to spaces that are open and they can listen up to communities, also to minorities that live in some kinds of spaces, and that can bring and foster people's imagination as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have just one more question before we move to the next guest. I was going to ask you, how do you select your sites? I mean, the site, I think it's plays an important role, obviously. So can you say something about it? in 2 minutes, possibly.
Sites or sides? Sorry.
I luoghi, the sites.
I sites. Okay. Actually, sometimes it depends, because in some cases we start the project by ourselves and we do not have like a client or a commissioner. So we start some research projects within Roma. For example, a project called Perestrello, we chose the site because we were, let's say, experiencing the city, first of all, and we found a big interest in that area because it was in a peculiar neighborhood that it's La Maranella, and it's nearby Pigneto, is in East Roma, let's say nearby Termini station. And this area was incredible because it was a neglected area for 10 years because of a urban development that never occurred. They had to, there was this exchange between the municipality and a private that had to develop a parking lot in this area. But he never opened up. He had to finish also the ground floor, but the let's say the contract between the private developer and the municipality wasn't clear. And this area was fenced and closed to the neighborhood for 10 years, in a neighborhood which needs actually these kind of spaces. So to say, sometimes we choose it because of an interest, because we see potential in this area. So we started our research finding our sites. And normally there was these sites that on a first view were, let's say, closed and fenced parking lots, empty spaces within buildings, area in a park that were in a kind of status in which there weren't people that were owning it, let's say, and they were just forgotten by both the public administration and by inhabitants. In some other cases, we work and collaborate with association and local groups that inhabit such spaces and want to bring on a cultural program and also a political or social program in these spaces. In other cases, it's, but let's say it's a research topic of interest, both that needs to have some interesting points of view, both from the political aspect, the social aspect, the spatial aspect, because the spaces that we choose are also challenging, because somehow there are like barren lands, but they are full of potential in the end. And the fact that they are in this middle point that are not so well controlled spaces, so they are not commonly really central areas in big cities, but there are more outcast areas.
They're critical areas. Okay, thank you, Nasrin. Thank you so much. We need to move to the next guest, so I'll turn the stage to Elias for a short introduction.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you, Nasrin. It was wonderful to see your lecture again. We haven't seen your work since 2016, and we hope to see it. It was great to see it, and we hope to see it also in ECOWEEK soon again. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is Alessio Batistella. Alessio is also an old-timer at ECOWEEK. Alessio, I haven't seen you probably 10 years, I would say. It's been a long time.
Probably.
Great to have you join us. Thank you. Alessio is the chairperson of Arco Architecture and Cooperation, with which he carries out projects, design and applied research in sustainable architecture in humanitarian emergency contexts. Alessio is a member of the advisory board and professor of the Design for Development at Politecnico di Milano. Arco works have been featured on many publications and architectural journals and have received several international awards. Alessio, I would like, in order to start, I would like to ask you, how do you see the relation between architecture and justice? And if you can explain the relation between practice and the work in a war context, for example.
Okay. I'm going to share in the screen, me too. Just, and I'm starting to Okay, so first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. So personally, I believe that architecture always has, or rather, it must always have to do with justice, because if it is well done, it must increase the quality of life of people and respect the environmental of place where it is. So the way in which we architects act in our daily practice also has a political value, especially in this moment that we are in a strong climate crisis, and I would add social crisis. In our project, the relationship between architecture and justice is quite evident due to the context where we operate, but we adopt such approach also in the Western world. The point is always turn constraints in opportunities. In this school that you, Elias, know, for example, the general frame for this school imposed very serious limit of action. Desert climb, fast and simple realization techniques through permitting the use of non-specialized workers, use of local materials, minimum budget, absolute prohibition of use for conventional building materials and foundation for building activities. Due to the Israeli law, which doesn't allow permanent building in sea area. By the way, the local community have had several demolition orders for the school, but it's still there, which is a kind of big problem for this community, which is always on the border, in between all the demolition. So what was our answer? Our answer was to use unconventional materials such as recycled tires filled with soil as building techniques, which have the double advantage of rapid and simple realization, high standard thermal isolation, and static resistance. So again, the constraint became opportunities, always this kind of relationship that for us became very important. With the kindergarten and women's center designed with Mario Cucinella that you are seeing, we move our attention from the West Bank to the Gaza Strip, where armed conflict reached high aggression level with extensive collateral damage. In this case, we decide to use a technique that employs earth bag as a structural base. Since the hydro and electric infrastructure failed to support civil needs, we decide to design the compound to support a depurated water pool, cleaned through a process of herbal purification and photovoltaic panels supporting almost all the compound needs. But the great success of this building was the creating safe place where children could stay away from the war and women have personal dignity in a context of religious fundamentalism. Unfortunately, this school was destroyed, demolished by the Israeli army on July 2014 after only 3 years of service, leaving the community without kindergarten, the women without any refugee. But we come back, we went back and we built a new school, which is the one that you saw in the same community. So this is part of the relationship between architecture and justice too. Just don't give up. This project were those project was carried with the NGO Venturi Terra, which was the one that carried out all the relationship with the communities. And so we get a quite interesting ready field when we went to build through the process of self-building construction our schools. Today we are working in Iraq, in Mosul, rebuilding the historical center of Mosul. This is a new UNESCO-funded project under construction in, as I say, in Mosul. But I think that my time is finished, and so I'm just show you just some of rendering because it is actually is under construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessio. I wanted to just, if you can just add one more sentence about the collaboration of the, how you said the project were built with the self-building. So if you can tell us a little bit about that, what does that mean? Was it the whole community, just men participated, or women, children were all sort of part of the process? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as I say, usually the NGO prepare the field for us, and so when we arrive, we get a community already to start to work together with us, and so we just in a way we are going to educate in terms of building field the community to be able to build their own public building, which in this case are school. Usually our schools became also public space in a whole sense, because they became not just schools, but also you know, building where they make a lot of activities, like a meeting, you know, whatever. And so
like
the
a
idea
community, like a community center kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically we work with the fathers, with the parents of the children that then will go on the school, that are going to frequent the school. So
Right.
it's a really community building of a build. Okay.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you, Alessio. Now we'll give again the microphone to Francesco to introduce our third speaker, Aslihan.
Thank you, Elias. So yes, the third guest of our panel is Aslihan Gunan. I hope again I pronounced the name correctly. And Asli is an architect, and she is a PhD candidate in the history of architecture and urban development program at Cornell University. But I understand that, like many others in this moment, in this world dominated by the pandemic, she's not in the US, but she is in Turkey currently. And her research investigates the histories and the representation of modern architecture in the late Ottoman Empire, in its broader geography, with questions of migration, displacement, dispossession, and violence, through comparative modernities and post-colonial theory. So welcome, Asli. Thank you for joining us today. And I would get you started with one question. So how do you see the practice of writing histories, and in which way your research on the Armenian minority can be seen as an attempt to write history in a new and a different way?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for all the organizers, and to Elias and Francesco for moderating our panel, and to Maria Luisa for her invitation. I will try to share my screen. Do you see the first page?
Yes, yes,
okay,
we can
perfect,
see. Thank
perfect. So as Francesco just said, I am doing my PhD, and it feels a little bit, strange, and I feel some responsibility to speak about architectural history when surrounded by many talented architects with very inspiring work. So I'll try to wrap it up in 5 minutes, but if anything remains unclear, just let me know. Broadly speaking, I work on the violent face of modernity in the late Ottoman Empire and the nation states that emerged out of it in the early 20th century. I look at the displacement of Armenian architects, citizens, and the transformation of citizenship rights and the narrative around their abandoned properties, like what happens to their houses when a mass population has to leave the country. In this sense, if I may cite Esra Akcan, I see architectural history as a mode of truth-telling. And as Maria Luisa has also expressed in her recent interview for the ECOWEEK, intersectional justice is important for us to be aware that oppressions are intertwined. There are multiple facets of it, and that we need to hear the many voices that have been silenced. So my project on the forced migration and mass murder of Armenians in 1915 and its aftermath in the built environment aims to do that, to facilitate confrontation, first by truth-telling, and see multiple sides of oppression by looking at laws and bureaucracies, architectural spaces, construction techniques, infrastructures, ruination, destruction, by inviting many voices to my project. Of course, I'm not the first person to work on this issue. Many scholars of history or law have worked on the Armenian genocide and the way the state appropriated their abandoned properties. Some scholars paid attention to how architecture became a commodity, for example, from a critique of capitalism, explaining the liquidation of goods and appropriation of properties. I ask the question of what happens to the built environment and how does architecture help us see the different perspectives on this issue. And I want to open a parenthesis here that I don't see architecture only as a tool or a mere representation of politics, but I instead look at architecture as an evidence, as a driving force, and as a primary source in my research. So how do I do it? While I work on this project, I try to overcome many established hierarchies and biased conventional histories based generally on victory. But besides the political biases, I also work on the architectural biases, for example, overcoming the modern versus vernacular opposition that renders the vernacular as the other of modernism is one of the issues I'm working on, because I claim that the formation of a discourse around vernacular is part of this contested modernization process. For example, the buildings in both of these images were built by Armenians, one by an educated Armenian and the other probably by craftsmen, but that connects in the history that I'm trying to narrate. I asked the question of how destruction, abandonment, and ruination affect the infrastructure and environmental resources. For example, I look at vernacular architecture in a rural town, analyzing how the local infrastructure has changed over time after 1915. And one may also multiply these questions by asking how does violence and destruction affect biodiversity or vegetation, since we're in ECOWEEK, but these are a little beyond my project and skill set, but still the questions that inspire me to, go deeper into the evidence and the built environment. Methodologically speaking, intersectionality also penetrates into the different temporalities I look at. So I make on-the-ground observations, in the present time. I do field work to understand the past. I go to the sites to the old villages, document the buildings, analyze construction materials, building techniques, as well as the debris, and the vegetation that is now surrounding the ruins. And I also conduct oral history, mostly with the Armenian citizens and architects who are also, currently living in Turkey, in order to overcome the silences in the archive. So I may add, different layers to architectural history writing. So all of these three images that you may see, an archival document, a correspondence, a vernacular architecture ruin, and an author who is currently living in Istanbul, they all become evidence to the architectural history that I'm trying to assemble. That's, I think, all I can share for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're really tight on time, so I will also in your case ask you a very, very short question. So where do you see this research going? I mean, once you complete your research, where would you think that, or would you like this project to get to? I don't know, a database or of something like that.
That's a very interesting question. I think I have to keep that question always in mind, because in PhD one is always very much concentrated on the dissertation that may eventually become a book. That's your first work. But I see exhibitions, for example, a very important part of this process that fosters dialogue, because a dialogue between different ethnicities, religious groups, etc., is something we need in Turkey, definitely. So any sort of media, including exhibitions or mappings of databases, etc., those would be very helpful to reach to a broader audience. Because this eventually is not only for architects, it's for many people who may be affected or who may be interested by the problem that I'm working on.
Thank you, Asli. Thank you so much, and
good
luck with the end of your research.
Thank you.
So I think unfortunately time is really running fast. I will just say thank you to all the people who participated in this round. I'll turn the stage to you, Elias, maybe so we can move to the next panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Francesco. Thank you to every one of our speakers. And I will pass on the microphone to Sophia. Sophia, or
you mean Despina and Consuelo?
Oh, Despina Consuelo, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Sorry, yeah, I wasn't sure. Sorry, thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you all of our previous guests. Just bear with us a moment as we are opening all of the videos. Thank you. Hi, I would like to introduce our second panel for this day. And first of all, I would like to introduce Consuelo Brigida, who is also part of this great organization. And besides moderating this panel, Consuelo has been one of the main organizers of this event, bringing live great ideas that made this event unique. Consuelo is an art historian, postgraduate fellow at Sapienza University in Rome, and just professor of art history at the University of Arkansas Rome program. She attended the Master in Patrimony and Heritage of the Church and completed a PhD in art history at Sapienza University, with this on women artists in Baroque Rome, and she has worked in many international museums as a researcher in Italy. Thank you, Consuelo, for being with us. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Despina, for your introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. And I want to thank the organizers, Maria Luisa Palumbo, Elias Messias, Sofia Passia, and Francesco Badeschi for this beautiful opportunity. So we are really at the, the very last one in order, and I think that so far it has been, everything is very good. So our panel is again discussing practices of education, and in this very second panel, education will be really the focus of the talks of our guests. Before introducing them, I want just to link to what was previously said by Suad Amiri. Architecture is a tool, and I think that I would like to add is a tool of education. So through education and educating people and young students to architecture and to art, I think it is the right tool to beat injustice, to build up a world of inclusion, and to better live the globalized world. So I would give the stage to you back, Despina, and welcome all our guests.
Thank you so much. I would also like to thank our guests for today, and especially of this panel. So I would like to introduce Alessandra Balatesti. Alessandra is an architect holding a PhD in environmental design. She's also an associate professor in architecture, technology, and environmental design at Sapienza Rome University, where among others, she is also head of the master's degree in landscape architecture, and head of the master's degree in architecture urban regeneration. Since 1992, she has been carrying out research, teaching, and experimentation activities on topics such as technological innovation for environmentally aware architecture, buildings ecological and energetic efficiency, bioclimatic approach and design. Recently, she is working in an urban ghetto in Rome, where she is going to introduce her work. Thank you, Alessandra. You are mute, yes.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the team of ECOWEEK and to Maria Luisa Palumbo for her kindly invitation. And now, for some years now, when attempting to regenerate the urban fabric of a big city, the field of environmental design has been tackling the challenges posed by ongoing climate change, extreme poverty, social marginalization, and health problems, where these are neither occasional nor residual situations that arise as part of development processes, but emerge as social diseases with deep-rooted characteristics in place that are already under significant man-made pressures, a type of pressures that causes serious environmental problems, air and water pollution, urban heat island, increasing temperatures, and social problems, criminality, drug addiction, mental illness, and nutritional disorders too. With the lack of radical policies designed to foster inclusion, the growth of areas characterized by marginalization and extreme poverty in cities is affecting this district, creating what are the whole intenses and purpose monosocial and monocultural enclave that lack service and where we constantly witness the gradual exclusion of residents from public space. The urban metropolis of Rome is afflicted by significant spatial segregation, and the residential area that we are studying as a research action group of Sapienza in Rome. The research group is a research group composed by architects, doctors, epidemiologists, anthropologists, and sociologists. That I would like to show this pilot project that we are doing, and the place is known as former Bastogi housing estate, and is undoubtedly particularly suited to the application of experimental design approach, given the complexity of the relationship that form there between the consolidated environment, health problems, social problems, and urban poverty. Let me show just a little bit some slides of this place in Rome, we are in northwestern part of Rome, and you can see that this is an enclave, and it's not so bad as on the architectural way, but all the public space are in asphalt, and the people that live here are affected from a lot of problems. First of all, this is it was conceived as a temporary residence to stay, and in 86 it was occupied by citizens, and the municipality had a negotiation between citizens and the authorities. And at the moment there are 6 buildings, row building, and where could be inside 1,000 inhabitants, but instead of 1,000 there are 2,000. So you can understand that we have a lot of problem there because of there are lack of public space, a lack of pedestrian paths, depression, insecurity, margination, environmental and hygienic decay, criminality and congestion, drug and alcohol diffusion, housing precariousness, unemployment, and chronic illness.
Alessandra, sorry to interrupt you. Could you please share your screen, because I think no one can actually see that?
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. Yeah, thank you.
I have not done the. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thank you.
But I believe that I have done. Do you see my screen? No. Now?
No. Yes.
Probably
Yes.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay. So
thank you so much.
I'm speaking about this kind of district. Okay, in the northwestern part of Rome, you can see here the 6 building, and these are the buildings, and the timeline temporary. It was constructed as a temporary stay for the Alitalia flying company, but in late 80s, a group of citizens, the poorest of the city of Rome, occupied the complex. At the moment, they are living there instead of 1,000 inhabitants, 2,000 inhabitants. So there are a lot of problems connected with this. Imagination, environmental and architectural decay, criminality, congestion, and drugs, alcohol diffusion, unemployment, and but there are a strong presence of youth people that is a potentiality for the place. So we work on it with social regeneration, and we think that the outdoor space regeneration is very important in cases like this, because of we believe that the active city is very important to create a sense of community and security in the city. So we work in this way, and we realize this kind of there's a playground and there's a 5-side football pitch with a recycled tile, with the participation of the people. Here you can see the inauguration of the place and the event. And one time before this kind of project, Bastogi was an enclave, a ghetto, a urban ghetto, where no one of the other inhabitants of the neighborhoods would like to go there. At the moment, we have that due this place, this playground, we can have psychomotor function, and they are important for the difficult of adolescence age group, for small children. We have the holding of well-organized sport courses for the people, the poor people, and we fostering the social relation and physical activity amongst all the age, and the attraction of the people from the neighborhood. The people from the neighborhood now go to Bastogi because there is this playground, but because it's beauty to go there, because there are a lot of activities, a lot of vitality, and all the people go there to stay outside and live outside. Next step that we would like to do and is the cultivation and some other part in outdoor place. And at the same time, we would like to design some allotment gardens where the people could cultivate foods, but not for the food production, but only for to fostering more and more the sense of community. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. I have just a question for you. And I guess this project is quite an example of this slogan I'm going to mention that quite recently we came across, and especially through the Black Lives Matter movement, that there is no social justice without environmental justice. And I think that this kind of work you're trying to do is pretty close to this slogan that usually comes out from the most vulnerable. So based on your experience, how big do you think is the gap between the academic and professional world towards this direction?
I believe that there are different approaches in the academic world. My approach is a participating approach, and I teach environmental design. So the slogan that you said before is very important for me. I believe that we can renovate a place only with environmental sustainability, and inside the building we are working to improve the quality of the air and the quality of well-being inside, because it's very important for the people to stay well in a place. Do you know that due to COVID-19, a lot of people that live every day in small apartments, in 6 or 7 people even, or with a dog, have seriously a lot of mental diseases, but the violence is common in this place during the COVID. So my academic research is to improve the quality of life. We are working with a student to redesign the apartments of Vastoggi, and we would like to convince the municipality that we have to intervene in this district to improve the quality of these people. Because it's important for the society. I believe that is a problem when a city like Rome has inside this kind of ghetto.
Exactly. Very interesting approach and holistic approach, I would say. Thank you so much, Alessandra, for your time. Coming up next, I would like to invite our next guest, Alessandro Melli.
Yes, I escape.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Alessandro is a design director and member of the board founder of Heliopolis 21, a multi-awarded international architecture practice based in Italy and in Berlin. He is also professor of architecture innovation at the University of Portsmouth and the architectural research leader of the architecture school. He is director of the cluster for sustainable cities. As an academic, his specialist teaching and research interests are in the fields of climate sensitive design, urban mutations, and community resilience. Recently, he has been appointed by the Italian government as a curator of the Italian Pavilion Venice Biennale in 2021, and he is going to share his thoughts about resilient communities. Thank you, Alessandro.
No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for this invitation. I've heard a very interesting thing, and by the way, very many architects that I have a higher estimation of. So I'm very happy to be here with you. I see that the time is not much, so probably the best is that I go directly to the presentation of the video that I wanted to show you. Just well, 2 caveats. The first one is that this is a sneak peek done organized by Ashim Sarkis, the curator, the international curator of the Venice Biennale. So it will be a little bit cryptic because we had to show something, but according to the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage, we are not allowed to disclose all the content. So please forgive me if something will be so particularly cryptic. And the second one is that you will find some typos in English. Please apologize. As you can see from my accent, this was expected, but I wanted to anticipate this. Okay. think you can see my screen. I hope you can see.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear also the sound?
Yes, yes.
Perfect.
Let's imagine a vibration of a system that we are unable to decipher. We describe these background noises as anomalies, sometimes even marginal side effects of more relevant observations. Yet, if only one experiment out of many gives a different result, the whole concept hypothesis is under discussion. The idea of the glitch, which hides the gate to a new universe, is recurring in our imagination. The Pandora's box idea has always pervaded mythology and undermined the foundations of our certainties. As a horror fairy tale, the unconsciousness fascinates and scares us. Plato's cave shadows and Carroll's rabbit tunnel, the anomalies of the systems, take us into an irrational place, at the edge of madness or nihilism, where immeasurable forces overwhelm our presence. Nonetheless, the search for the heart of darkness is a functional instinct, rooted in our non-deterministic mode of survival. It also depends on associative thinking, born between 200,000, which contributed to overcome environmental crises seemingly insurmountable from linear thinking's standard mode. The most sensational misinterpretation of an anomaly regards a background signal that Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson in 1964 were trying to eliminate when they were restarting an antenna for radio astronomy observations. With their eyes turned to the stars, they believed the anomaly was due to a local radio or to pigeons that had nested on the antenna, before realizing they had recorded the fossil echo of the Big Bang. Unknowingly, the Crawford Hill antenna was perfectly designed to record the microwave background radiation. This evidence contradicts the bias of science as a terrain of rationality and determinism. The alignment of coincidental discoveries, including Fleming's penicillin, Galileo's observation of the moon, and back to the discovery of fire, are manifestations of a creative serendipity. An apparently insignificant lambda, introduced by Einstein to correct theories of general relativity, has disrupted our little warm cosmos and opened a portal to the endless expansion of invisible icy dark matter. What if climate change is the lambda calling for a new architectural taxonomy? The dark architecture, beyond current taxonomies, might be intrinsically ecological instead. The Resilient Communities Project aims at listening to the background noise, which is already deafening. The Italian Pavilion wishes to give a voice to marginalization and corroborates the priority of transdisciplinary research as an observation tool. Stephen Jay Gould and Elizabeth Verba revolutionized the biology taxonomy, introducing the exaptation as a non-deterministic mechanisms of natural selection. Heuristically, the Italian Pavilion will promote the architectural exaptation as a manifestation of diversity, variability, and redundancy. As a scaled resilient city, the pavilion will challenge the deterministic aesthetical homogeneity in favor of the diversity of the creative structures. As nature operates in economics, the pavilion design is based on the functional co-optation of what is on site already. Like the human genome and brain, the pavilion is a jungle inhabited by strange creatures. The heterogeneity of its architectural components are therefore an expression of the inclusiveness of the adaptive and resilient potential of architectural acceptation. We wanted to go to Mars, and instead, we brought Mars to Earth. The status quo is not an option.
Let me close. Stop share. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so just again, I see the time, so maybe I will not, as I anticipated, I wanted to show a couple of slides, but are not very relevant for me. It's more relevant to make three very super short comments. The first is that I forgot that I have a third caveat, and now everybody knows that I am a nerd, probably watching the video. I cannot hide this anymore. The second is that in the background of this, we are trying to highlight with the Italian Pavilion the possibility that we need probably new taxonomy that goes beyond, let's say, what maybe the reference could be. Let's say during the exhibition of the MoMA, the 64, about architecture without architects by Rudolski, sorry. When at the beginning he highlight one thing and say, well, architecture, what we define as architecture is actually a very selected cultural extrapolation from let's say Western culture architecture environment. So my point is not ideologic or political in this case. My point is that since the research on biology, on evolutionary biology, is telling us that diversity, redundancy, and variability are the only way we have to become more resilient, especially in case of extreme, let's say, extreme crisis like the one that we are facing now. The point is, what if in the rest of the architecture we are not considering today, we could find a form of examples of intrinsically ecological architecture? So we just need to embrace diversity, redundancy, and variability, not only as, how can I say, political, not in a political perspective, but really because this is probably one of the few ways that we have to overcome the environmental crisis and probably to overcome the risk of the threat of our survival. Thank you very much.
Totally agree. And could you please tell us a bit more about the idea of the CO2 reduction with design of the pavilion, of the Italian pavilion?
Yes, actually, this is right about the discussion of the possibility of a new taxonomy. The main question is, we define architecture, everything that is the result of a process, a deterministic process. Scenario, we think that there are uses or needs for that scenario, and then we define shape, space, or structure adapted to that scenario. Acceptation in biology of evolution is telling us that natural selection, to be appropriately resilient, operates also in the opposite way. Natural selection creates diverse forms, very articulated, very diverse, in order to allow for functional cooptation in case that the scenario that we are facing is totally different from what, let's say, the natural selection in this case as was expecting. So this is exactly the same thing we are trying to do in the Italian pavilion. So we took we started from the project of Milovan Faronato for the art exhibition in the Biennale of Art, and we started from the, let's say, redundancy of the shape that you already created to determine a new project. So this is why I think there is a possibility to find the key of intrinsically ecological architecture, because basically we did the project CO2 zero because we are coopting from a functional point of view everything we have found already there. But really, this experience told us that really in the redundancy, in the variability of the shape, we can find everything. In a way, what I'm trying to say is that we are trying to operate in the same way that nature does. Nature operates in economy. So it doesn't create shapes for a certain purpose. It always tries to cope functionally what it's already there. The point of the taxonomy is the last thing that I'm saying is that I'm aware that, of course, someone can come to me and say, well, Alessandro, this is not new. This is recycling. This is regeneration, etc., etc. But this is exactly the point of the taxonomy. Why, if we take regeneration, recycling, restoration, informality, we put all together, we have a big bunch of things that are out of the classification of what is architecture, how can I say, what is considered architecture as the most important thing in the world. So these are all things that we push aside and we say this is marginalization. This is exactly what happened in the 80s in the biology of evolution. So since the end of the 19th century until the 80s of the last century, we thought that everything that concerned natural evolution was deterministic approach. Then we realized that it was different. Why? So sorry, I know I'm taking probably more than I expected, but sorry, just to tell this. This is why I'm using the metaphor of the black matter. When you change a taxonomy, according to science, you change a taxonomy when the background noise, when the exceptions are so many that what is considered mainstream doesn't make any sense. You need to redesign a new taxonomy.
Very interesting approach. Yeah, it's quite interesting because I also had a discussion recently, and it's not about inventing the wheel basically, because even the past generations used to build more sustainable way than we do now. So I think, yeah, you totally have a point. Thank you so much. And Consuelo, please, you are free to invite our next guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Despina. Thank you for the interesting talks so far. Well, the guest is Anna Chiara Cimoli, and particularly happy to introduce her because she's the only art historian besides me in this conference today. So Anna Chiara is based in Milan, and she, after her graduation in art history, she got a museology degree in the École du Louvre in Paris, and then a PhD in history of architecture from the Polytechnic Institute of Turin. She teaches a course in social history of art at the State University of Milan, and as well as a workshop in museum and mediation. And since 2001, she has been associated of ABC Città, which is a collective of urbanists and cultural designers. She has published extensively, and I want here just to remember the blog Museum and Migration and the online magazine Roots and Routes. Well, Anna Chiara Cimoli is going to talk to us about the museums as a school and a battlefield. Please, Anna Chiara, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to having been able to listen to you and for this invitation. Thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen, and please feel free to tell me if you don't see it. Otherwise, I will just, okay, fine. Thank you so much. So yes, the museum as a school and as a battlefield. Of course, I'm not the only one to consider it like this. It was born, well, not really born. It was born as as actually a chamber for curiosities, so to speak, as a Wunderkammer, and then it became a school later on. But still, I believe it is most of all a school. And it has always been a battlefield. Maybe now we understand it better than maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. But the museum is a room, actually. To me, is a room within a city, within a context. And of course, it can never be neutral. It is not meant to be neutral, as any discourse can never be. So yes, I'm an associate of ABC Città. So when I was much younger, I started working in, so to say, difficult contexts. But I think we all share this experience of working with the people and listening to them and working through participatory tools. So this is really maybe my school more than university or other formal education contexts I've attended in the past. So it was mainly actually being with the people that I think I got to understand a few things, if I have, I hope so, but mostly working with the migrant audiences. I've been teaching and actually advocating as an activist for more than 20 years now And I believe this intersection of the professional side of my life and the political and activist is very crucial to me and to many of my colleagues within Abicittà, but also elsewhere. Yes, thank you. Consuelo Museum and Migration is a very simple tool. It is a blog I edit together with a friend who is from Greece originally, Maria Vlahu. Actually, it's a very simple repository of practices. And it opened actually with the idea, it was launched with the idea of collecting all the practices, be them good or bad, we don't judge, but really trying to maybe organize a little bit, talking of taxonomy, all the practices that were stemming out the so-called refugee crisis. And also with the idea, and this is crucial to my short presentation, that we really have to understand each other's in terms of learning from each other's. I mean, what I learned from the field of, for example, say performance arts in that very moment was very crucial to my work within museums. Just to name one experience, but also from school, from kindergartens, for example. And the other tool is Roots and Route, which is an online magazine I edit with Giulia Grechi and Viviana Gravano. And it is also for us a good way of keeping in touch with independent researchers throughout the world. Articles are published in many different languages, and please take a look at it. And of course, you're all welcome to submit an article if you feel like it. And so talking about methodology, yes, I wanted to quote this sentence. I don't want to be included. Instead, I want to question who set the standard in the first place. I don't want to say simplistic, it is everything but simplistic, but it might sound somehow as a slogan. But I believe in Italy, we are very much at that point. We're talking about inclusion. We don't have any better expression, but talking about inclusion is no longer the way, maybe, in my opinion, to consider the role of cultural institutions. Because if we keep actually repeating this rhetoric of inclusion, we really risk to miss the point. And the point is that we are all different, of course. Migration has been a vital part of the Italian society for so many decades. And being still at that point of involving, inviting and welcoming people is actually a very dangerous rhetoric. I prefer to talk, yeah, of course, it is easy to criticize. So what shall we talk about? It's not, of course, just the choice of words. It is the choice of the deep attitudes, and it has much to do with our own bodies and the way we relate to each other. But I think of active citizenship maybe as a good alternative, because in the end, who welcomes whom? Here we are outside of the Egyptian Museum, which, as I'm sure many of you know, has been actually under the spotlight in the last years because of its very open philosophy and its way of inviting all the different communities living in Turin. So it was very much attacked by the right-wing politicians, some of them, not all of them, of course. But then it's interesting to talk about this idea of welcoming, because of course we welcome each other as a society, I believe. So the museum is the place where we really welcome a community which we are part of. This girl is a second-generation Egyptian. She's a citizen, an Italian citizen living in Turin. And it's interesting, this double use of the language, right to left and left to right, which is also so much connected to the way we look at the works of art within museums. So this is just to say how complex it is and how we really have to delve into it with a lot of attention and with a lot of delicacy, so to say. And of course, this leads me to the following point, which is going towards a multi-layered approach to diversity in the museum field. In Italy, we tend to talk about the Moroccan community, the Egyptian community, the Chinese community. Of course, we know there is no such thing as a Chinese community. Anthropology is very clear on that point, but I believe we really have to take into account all the post-colonial reflection at a very broad scale. So all the experiences asking to decolonize museums. This is not something that is happening abroad and that maybe one day will arrive in Italy. It is going on, and we have to take it into account, I believe, today. Because identity is multi-layered, and also because identity is dynamic, of course. So we can no longer consider somebody who arrived 20 years ago in Italy as, yes, we will always be migrants because that's part of our biography. But so many identities have actually overlapped one on top of the other. I have a brief case study, just 2 minutes, the Shoah Memorial in Milan. I collaborate as an activist since its very beginning. And as maybe you know, it was founded by the Jewish community in Milan together with a huge group of associations. And it hosted for many summers a group of refugees during the night. And it is an extremely interesting experience of a museum. Actually, it's a memorial place that worked as such during the day, and at night it became something else. But these two identities, the cultural one and the, how can I say, this experience really of hosting people, refugees and people who were on their way towards Northern Europe was extremely productive, also in terms of new forms of representation. So we worked a lot on mapping, on writing down one biographies, on visiting the place by night, which was extremely interesting. And it was really a huge collective conversation starter. Maybe you know Liliana Segre on the right, who is a senator, and she's an Auschwitz survivor. And she was, of course, the one who really asked to host the refugees during that season. Plural interpretations. I believe very much in this idea of plural interpretations where the plurality doesn't come from our geographical origins, but on our own personal interpretation. So here you have a good example in my viewpoint, which is Fabbriche di Storie at the Uffizi Gallery, which is actually a reading of the works of art through a personal lens, which is not an autobiographical one. So it's not, I come from Uganda, but it is very much what I see in that painting. And you can find it online and on any, they are podcasts actually. And talking about plurality, I wanted to share here this case study I'm working upon in this very moment. It's with a huge group of teenagers from high school who are in actually working from home in this period, and a group of adults with...
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, yes. But we have a very, very, very little time left. So please. Okay,
it's the last thing I'm going to talk about. So yes, I just wanted to tell you it is it's a sacred art museum, and it's in the north of Milan. It's Villa Clerici and a Catholic art museum. And the idea still is, because it's ongoing, to reflect upon the main issues of of art, actually, that can be really transversal. So we work upon this sacred art collection, but almost without mentioning one's religious beliefs, because we try to go beyond it. So I hope we have the occasion maybe to talk about it more in the future, and thank you very much for listening.
No, thank you to you. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but we are really...
no, I understand, of course.
Over the time, the topic, by the way, it's super interesting, and it really should give rise to a lot of consideration and questions, and I hope the public is going to raise some questions on Q&A tag. Well, I would go right away to the next and last guest of today's conference, and the next guest is Professor John Fallon. I'm pretty, let's say, excited to present him. He's my head of the department, the faculty where I teach for. So John Fallon founded and leads the Urban Design Studio, Build Studio, which is a collaborative of students, professors, and professionals. And they work with the community residents on implementation of appropriate, affordable, replicable design solution. He also founded the Project RE with the mission to reuse materials and facilitate landfill diversion, rebuild communities by strengthening capacity of local residents, and restore lives by teaching people trade skills to secure a living wage. In 2019, John Fallon was appointed Architecture Department Head in the Fayetteville School of Architecture and Design at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. His work has been recognized by the American Institute of Architects, the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture and Design Corp Seed Awards. John has been registered as an architect since 1995 and a lead accredited professional since 2008. John's talk is going to be being president. I'm very, very proud to give the stage to Professor John Fallon. Please, John.
Thank you for the invitation, Consuelo, and the very kind introduction. I've really enjoyed the presentations and want to thank the organizers of the conference for including me. And I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So as Consuelo referenced, the subject here is going to be being present, which is talking about the potential for schools of design, schools of architecture, but more broader context, schools of design, and their ability to be present in the communities where we hope to have a significant impact. I'm going to talk about the work of the Urban Design Build Studio, which was founded in 2008 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Urban Design Build Studio has been moved with me down to Northwest Arkansas. And then I'll talk a bit about Project RE, which is an organization that I founded in 2012, and Consuelo described the underpinnings. The focus of this work is to look at triple bottom line objectives through the lens of communities and understanding what the communities need. There are efforts that are made by the schools of design, and oftentimes those efforts emanate from contexts that are foreign to the communities where we hope to have impact. And I think the larger question here is, how can we demonstrate ways of empowering residents by being present and being consistently present with them as partners and not necessarily as agents working on their behalf. So this image is an image of Project RE. This is the community room. This is a room that seats up to 200 people. It's a flexible space. The projection that's on the wall that's used in there is part of a film. There are a series of films that we've generated to talk about aspirations relative to Project RE in the Urban Design Build Studio, looking at the possibility of developing appropriate, affordable, regionally specific, replicable solutions that can transform the economic landscape for residents. The work of Project RE in the Urban Design Build Studio is focused on the significant problems that are tied to concentrated poverty. This map of the United States shows areas of significant concentrated poverty. This is a global problem. This is the perspective within the United States. The regions where Project RE and the Urban Design Build Studio have been working are impacted significantly by those. And we'll talk a little bit about how those might be understood. And then as they're understood through the lens of those who are experiencing them, how students and how design faculty, consultants, and other professionals can be brought together in collectives with other residents to help address some of these problems. So in the formation of Project RE, this this graphic indicates looking at the significant challenges of the Homewood community in Pittsburgh. On the upper left, you're seeing demographic information that talks about infant mortality, lack of diversity, lack of opportunity, poor educational systems, and the challenges that proposes relative to opportunity and how that promotes conditions that further deteriorate the spaces. So with Project RE, we work with at-risk youth. We work with people who are re-emerging into society post-incarceration. And we work specifically with population decline, which Pittsburgh has been facing in great, at a significant rate. So we're looking at material reuse in a way that can be used as part of job skill training, and then engaging communities in opportunities to transform their environments. Students that are incorporated into the studio, the Urban Design Build Studio, understand that their solutions have to be demonstrable. So we don't work on things that are not relevant to the community. They're not theoretical in perspective. They're all about application. We work on projects so that the scale of the solution matches the scale of the problem, and they're predicated on collective intelligence. As was mentioned, Project RE, our mission statement is to reuse materials. So we deconstruct the buildings that are creating blight. We store and catalog those materials, and then we work with the community to rebuild their community using those materials with the aspiration of restoring lives through job skill training and other opportunities that I'll provide some examples of here in a moment. This is Project RE's facility. These are the community rooms, the gallery, and the remote Urban Design Build Studio location. This is adjoined to a 17,000 square foot full fabrication facility. But I'm using these pavilions to illustrate what you're seeing is a construction that is made 100% from salvaged material that's been diverted from landfill. These are all materials that were taken from buildings that were deconstructed and that were blighting the landscape and were transformed through the hands and job skill training of community residents in conjunction with the students. Since its existence, the Urban Design Build Studio has completed 112 built projects. They've ranged in scale. They're permanent. They're also mobile solutions that are invested. And each one is predicated on a system of education and a network of partnerships. So this image here shows collaboration between students of architecture, students in graphic design, and other area design disciplines, working with the Trade Institute of Pittsburgh, which is a job skill training partner that we've utilized for a significant period of time, where we're training them in the use of carpentry, steel, as well as masonry.
John, I'm sorry, can you just check your connection, because sometimes it is going on and off. So just to verify if everything is set properly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is everything okay now?
Slightly better. Just
Slightly better?
Yeah,
Okay.
just try to go ahead, Lindsay.
Part of the effort in developing the work is to engage processes that allow the community residents to have a hand in the work. So it's less about doing work for the community and much more about doing work with the community. This is an example of another project that is made entirely from reclaimed materials. These all taken from the Hazelwood community, where Elaine Price, the woman who is in the center image at the top, runs a youth program. Not only were the people who emerged from this community and in job skill training programs through Project RE involved, but the at-risk youth that Elaine Price works with. So utilizing skill sets that they have and their abilities, allowing them to invest in a positive and a dignified future for them. The work is predicated on listening. We have several different mechanisms that we use. This is a device called the negotiation table. It's an electric bike that we've modified. It opens up and allows us to hold events with food so that people can have a discussion across a table. It also allows us to collect oral histories in places where the residents ask and can reference the context which they're discussing. As an example of a project that emerges from this process, this is Courtney McFeeters. Courtney had suffered from drug addiction and was a resident of Homewood. Through understanding issues related to food scarcity and food access within Homewood, it was done through the negotiation table program. Working with residents, there was an opportunity for Courtney to emerge as a business owner with a very limited scale intervention. Again, you're seeing project reoccupation of an abandoned space, building a sequence of furniture that can lock down and allow her to operate a cafe, which is the first course cafe located in Homewood. So I think the question here is, how can we demonstrate with the work that our studios do through tangible interventions that are permanent and focused on empowering residents? How can the School of Design have a greater impact? And with that, I will conclude and thank you.
Thank you, John. It was very interesting. And I think that we have time just for a very, very short question. And as an educator, I'm talking for myself, of course, I would like to know how can design schools demonstrate the practices of sustainability through the courseworks?
So is that specific to me or to the
Yes,
panel?
this is to you.
I think the primary mechanism is by forming partnerships in the community. The communities know what they need more than the students. So for example, when students typically enroll in an urban design build studio, the way the course is advertised relates to the community. So even though it's intended to be a design build project, the way the course is advertised is it states that we're going to be working in a community. There's no guarantee of what the project will be. There's no guarantee of that there will be a built outcome. There's no guarantee of anything. If the project is going to be successful, it's going to emerge from partnerships that emanate from the community, because ultimately the community has to embrace and take care of whatever is produced. So if we as designers impose something that we think is of value or bring things in that we think are of value, ultimately it's a toxic form of charity. So I think it's really about positioning these questions in a much more open-ended way and committing time, and then committing to being present.
Thank you, John. So time is really over. Thank you so much. And thank to all the panelists, and I give the stage back to Despina for.
I think I will.
Yes.
Malu.
Yeah, we will skip the break as we're running really late, and Malu is going to conclude.
Yeah, it's really late. I want to thank again really all our speakers. And I think that these short talks have shown us that it is actually possible to think about and also use architecture not to build monuments to those in power, but on the contrary, to heal, to advocate for those who have no power, to foster other voices, to foster new forms of dialogues and presence in space. So I've been taking words and suggestions for all your talks. And I really hope this was inspiring for all of us. I'm sorry that we didn't have enough time to take more questions and discuss more, but I really think it was a great session of ideas and insight. Elias?
Despina wanted to say something. Thank you, Malu.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for being with us, all of the attendees, all of our guests. I think it was quite a wide opening, and I think those are issues that are really hard usually to address within the industry. And it's very inspiring that we have gathered today, and the discussion has opened. I'm aware that of the time limit, so we will actually ask our participants that they will also participate at the workshop, just to connect on their links of the workshop, so they can meet their tutors for these sessions. And thank you once again for this great event, both the organizers and the guests and the speakers.
And maybe Sophia wanted to say something before I close.
It's okay. Thank you, Elias. Thank you, Despina. Thank you, Maria Luisa, and thank you, everyone, and you joining, and all the organizers and speakers. It was really a great day. I know everybody's a bit tired now, but I mean, we can connect to the workshops. So the workshop participants, we invite you to connect to the workshop links and have a good rest of the ECO weekend that follows on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophia. And thank you all for joining. I think it was really amazing to get all these different points of view. And I think, Malu, it was very rewarding, from the discussion that we had early on, now to have all these ideas on the table, to start to realize this shift of a paradigm, that things are changing. As we experience change with COVID, we actually experience change in architecture, in the use of space, in the use of public space. So I think it's amazing that we shared these ideas, and everybody now should take them and try to use them in their own profession and work and study and every possible opportunity. So thank you all for joining, and we look forward to seeing the presentations tomorrow, and good luck with the workshops, and enjoy. Thank you all very much.
Grazie, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Arrivederci.
Ciao, ciao.